Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth, also known as the Continuum Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Chris Kent, and normally I say that I'm the game master, but not this time. A friend of mine actually ran this one. But before I go any further, smash that like button, ring the bell so you know when I upload stuff, and make sure you're subscribed. We have a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Before we get going, I received some questions recently that I should address. We've mentioned in several videos now that the immortal character that we call Red used to go by the name Dagda, and that as Dagda, he had the split power, so one of him could turn into 12 of him. So, to clear up something I did not adequately explain, there is not one Red, there are a lot of them. So this is just one of those guys. If anyone's confused about that, it's okay. Just drop me a comment and I'll explain more, or I can drop a link to a video that explains the idea. But the Reds are almost like a race in a way. So the Red in this adventure is just one member of that race and is not the same Red that was in our last video about Doc Savage. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know. All that said, let's dive in. So the prologue to today's story takes place in 1934. To relieve his boredom, the supervillain known as Ming the Merciless, ruler of the planet Mongo and self-proclaimed emperor of the universe, begins to cause natural disasters to take place on Earth. Meanwhile, on Earth, a group of original characters, controlled by the players, board a plane, as does a young woman by the name of Dale Arden. A young polo star named Flash Gordon tries to board the plane, but is told there's no more room, so he'll have to wait for the next one. Which brings us to the main plot of today's adventure. On the plane, Red meets an attractive travel agent. This is Dale Arden. And in the middle of their flight, the hero's cockpit is hit by a meteor and the pilots perish. So this particular Red heads to the front of the plane. The other player characters check their character sheets to see who has the highest vehicle skill. So another player character named Noah Tall, aka Mr. Know-It-All, heads to the front of the plane as well. Between Noah and Red, they take control and manage to land the plane next to a greenhouse owned by a scientist named Dr. Hans Zarkov. Dr. Zarkov believes that the disasters are being caused by extraterrestrials pushing the moon towards the Earth using a Death Star level tractor beam. Or I guess in this case, it'd be a repulsor beam. Zarkov has constructed a spacecraft to investigate the attacks, and the player characters offer to lend a hand. Together, everyone flies to Mongo, where they are then captured by Ming's troops. After looking at the heroes, Ming is smitten with Dale Arden and orders the rest to be executed. But at the last minute, Ming's daughter, Princess Aura, who we have pictured in our art this week, she saves Red, with whom she fell in love at first sight. That's because Red has an advantage on his character sheet called the Valentino effect, which we took from Tales from the Floating Vagabond. And simply put, it means if there are female characters there, he's the one they are attracted to. At any rate, Zarkov then seems to be brainwashed by Clytus, the head of the secret police. Meanwhile, Aura and the player characters flee to Arboria, the kingdom of Prince Baron. Locked in Ming's bedchamber, Dale escapes, and Zarkov is sent to intercept her. But Zarkov reveals he resisted the brainwashing and escapes Mingo City with Dale. They are quickly captured by Prince Voltan's Hawkmen and taken to Sky City. While they're doing that, Aura and the player characters arrive at Arboria, and Aura asks the prince to keep them safe. But the Prince Baron is in love with Aura, and he sees her how she's now in love with Red, so he's furious. And as soon as she leaves, he tries to kill the heroes. They fight Baron and his men, but are outnumbered, so the heroes are forced to run away. Baron chases them, and they are all captured by the Hawkmen. Aura returns to her father's palace and is taken prisoner by Clytus and General Kala for her treason. Meanwhile, Ming prepares to marry Dale. The player characters and Prince Baron are taken to Sky City, where they are forced to fight Prince Baron in a death match. And unlike the 1980 film, in our game, one of the player characters was a German man named Langturm Kinderleben, and he actually kills Baron. So the heroes won't have Baron as an ally to help them now. Clytus arrives, and then the player characters kill him too. Knowing this will bring about retribution, Voltan and the Hawkmen evacuate, leaving the heroes behind. Ming's ship arrives and captures the heroes. He's impressed with them, and Ming says if they pledge their loyalty to him, he'll spare their lives and they will have a place in his ranks. But the heroes refuse, so Ming gives the order to destroy Voltan's kingdom along with them. Finding some rocket cycles, the heroes then escape before Sky City is destroyed. They contact Voltan and they plot an attack on Mingo City. To defend the city, General Kala dispatches a war rocket known as Ajax, which is ambushed and seized by the Hawkmen. Meanwhile, Princess Aura overpowers the guards and frees Dr. Zarkov from the execution chamber. The player characters and the Hawkmen attack Mingo City in the Ajax rocket, and Kala activates the defenses as Ming and Dale's wedding is beginning. Mingo City's force field can only be penetrated by flying Ajax into it at a suicidal speed. So Red volunteers to stay at the helm because, like we said earlier, there isn't just one Red. He's basically his own race. So on some level, he feels a bit disposable. So Red pilots the ship by himself to ensure success and enable everyone else to invade the city. After fighting through Ming's guards, Dr. Zarkov manages to deactivate the force field right before the Ajax rocket strikes it. Red flies the rocket ship into the city's wedding hall, and he impales Ming. He gets out of the rocket, confronting Ming, and Ming attempts to use his power ring on Red, but it falters and nothing happens. Ming then aims the ring at himself and seems to be vaporized. So a victory celebration commences, which brings us to the epilogue of today's adventure. This particular Red marries Princess Aura, and they become the new leaders in Ming's place. Aura names Voltan the general of their armies, and as the new emperor of Mongo, Red gives the player characters a ship, which they and Zarkov use to return to Earth. And that was it for that game session. I can kind of imagine now there are probably certain questions like, why was Flash Gordon not in your Flash Gordon adventure? I remember the conversation we had about that. The guy who ended up playing the German character, he's actually a friend of mine, named Jason. And he's a huge Flash Gordon fan. He loves Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. Um, Personally, I'm actually more of a Buck Rogers guy, but at any rate, I love retro futurism, ray punk, gothic, atom punk, all that stuff. I love the idea of science fiction, with like modern slick production values, but it has that retro look to it, right? I love it when the rocket ships and everything kind of remind you of like a 50s car, like a 57 Chevy with the fins and stuff. Um, so at any rate, uh when our friend Dave was going to run this game, um Jason spoke up and said, "So who gets to play Flash?" And there was kind of like this pregnant pause. And I feel like everybody on some level knew what everybody else was thinking, which was basically one guy gets all the glory or whatever, you know what I mean? And everybody else is going to feel like they're relegated to kind of sidekick level, like they don't matter. Um, and I guess that's probably where Jason was coming from, was he wanted to matter. And of course I get that. Because if you feel like your character doesn't matter, then why bother playing the game at all, right? So one of the other players, who was named Chris, asked, basically, well, is this a Flash Gordon game, or is this a Ming the Merciless game? And is the point that any of us care about Flash Gordon, or is the point that we like the atom punk aesthetic and we just want to play a retro sci-fi game with ray guns and rocket ships and jetpacks and all that jazz? Um, And we went out of our way throughout the game, by the way, to say, like, when we would describe the ray guns, we would describe them as ending in like a series of concentric little like satellite dish shapes. You know what I mean? And it would end in an antenna. Sorry, man, I got weirdly tongue tied there. Um, you get the idea. We described the whole thing as very retro. The rocket cycles we mentioned had like glossy red paint jobs, but we said the paint had glitter in it. If you're of a certain age, you might remember going to, like, for me, it was the county fair. For other people, it might be like an amusement park or something. But they would have these little rocket ships that you would ride, and the paint always had glitter in it. You know what I mean? And it was nostalgic. So I guess that's kind of the idea, is the whole game was designed to be nostalgic. It was supposed to appeal to fond memories from your childhood, whether it was something that a physical object you interacted with, like those fair rides, or whether it was maybe watching old black and white science fiction movies, on the weekend or whatever. But we talked about it, and the two conclusions we arrived at is, first of all, um, we weren't playing because of Flash Gordon himself, right? And the second thing was, we wanted everybody to have a good time and not feel like they're just a sidekick, or they're just somebody else's supporting cast. You know what I mean? Um, I think had this been a solo game, let me say something else. Since I'm normally the game master, on the rare sort of things where I actually get a chance to play, never seems to happen these days. Um, but when I do get to play, I think it's because I'm normally the GM. A lot of the people in my circle of friends sort of see me as like the leader of our friends group, because the game master's the authority. You know what I mean? So even when I'm not the GM, to some extent, they will kinda turn to me and go, "So what do we do now?" You know? So I guess I kind of assumed I was gonna play Flash Gordon initially. And so then when Jason said that, I was like, "Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'm not Flash Gordon." Um, and we didn't it's not like we screwed over the character of Flash Gordon because we left an opening for him to appear in later adventures, and by the way, he does. For anyone who's familiar with the original comic strips, um, I feel like people think that Flash Gordon only really has one enemy, and it's Ming the Merciless, and that's it. And all he ever does is deal with Ming, but that's really not the case at all. At one point in the comic strips, Flash seemed like he'd kind of won, and he went back to Earth and he fought crime on Earth, which we see that in our Golden Age games. After 1938, Flash Gordon and Superman team up on a couple of adventures and are dealing with things. Um, and then there's a point in the story where Flash Gordon becomes an astronaut and he's exploring other worlds, so on and so forth. So it's not that we screwed him over somehow, we just didn't use him in this particular adventure, and that's why. But at any rate, um, we had a good time playing this. I hope that you had a good time listening to it. If so, smash that like button, ring the bell so you know when I upload stuff. Make sure you guys are still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people. And as always, leave us a comment as that really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. I hope you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.